William Ruto has been sworn in as Kenya's fifth president after the Supreme Court upheld his election victory. Nigeria's film industry dropped for the first time in 3 years. Stay tuned for the details. And Tunisian authorities have launched a modern initiative to boost the country's healthcare system. Well, this and more coming your way on The World Today. Hello, this is Eyeafrica TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante and now the news in detail. And we begin this bulletin in Kenya because Kenya's newly elected President William Ruto has been sworn in as the fifth president of Kenya after a narrow win in a fiercely contested presidential elections last month. The swearing-in came after the Supreme Court upheld his election win following election results petition from opponent Raila Odinga. Moses Imendi has the details in this report.
It is a new era for Kenya as William Ruto took presidential oath on Tuesday to commence his 5-year mandate in office. He becomes the fifth president of the East African nation after defeating political veteran Raila Odinga in the August 9 election. During the swearing-in ceremony, his supporters cheered from the stands of Kasarani Stadium in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. He took the oath of allegiance and another one to effectively execute the functions of the office, but less than 3 weeks ago, his victory was challenged by rival Raila Odinga, who after losing his fifth shot at presidency resorted to petitions against election results, which were dismissed by the country's Supreme Court. Outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta congratulated Mr. Ruto on the election win and said it is a hallmark of Kenya's democracy, imploring the new leader to work for all Kenyans. Now it is business time for William Ruto, but he takes on a daunting task to lead a highly indebted Kenya, coupled with increased prices of basic goods spurred by COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. Unemployment remains a major problem, particularly among the young people of Kenya. Inflation soared to 8.5% last month, amid a declining currency and rising fuel costs. Ruto in his campaign pictured the hardship of Kenyans and made some rather hopeful vows such as tackling the cost of living crisis and revitalizing farming through what he calls Hustlers Fund. But whether he will deliver on the promises remains to be seen. Mr. Ruto, once a roadside chicken seller, often referred to himself as a hustler-in-chief, who is born poor unlike the Kenyattas and Odingas. With such self-description, many low-income voters view him as the man who understands their hardships and worries, for he was once in the same shoes as them. Moses Imendi, Eyeafrica News.
William Ruto takes oath of office and becomes Kenya's fifth elected president. Now moving on, Nigeria's entertainment industry, which comprises motion pictures, sound recording and music production, has been contracted by 6% for the first time since 2019. This is according to data from the National Bureau of Statistics, which reveals that growth in the country's entertainment sector had declined by 6%, leaving industry players worried about the situation. The cinema industry attributed its compounding challenges to lack of government support and growing insecurity in the West African nation. Let's have more details of that in this report.
Titi Jeje is a renowned Nollywood film director and storyteller. He has directed over 50 movies, some of which are on streaming platforms like Netflix. Titi is driven by his passion for projecting the African story to the world, but the high cost of production and other hurdles have stalled his pace.
If before we spend like 50 naira on each production, now I can tell you that we are spending 200 naira on each production. So it's like times 3 of what we are spending before. The problem with Nigeria is this: whatever goes up, don't come down. We have to keep living by it.
Besides crude oil, Entertainment has been one of Nigeria's biggest exports. The sector, which covers movies, music, fashion and more, accounts for 1.45% of Nigeria's GDP, according to the International Monetary Fund. But for the first time in 7 quarters, the sector recently suffered a 6% decline. Industry players blame post-COVID changes, insecurity, low investment revenues ratios, and lack of government support for the contraction.
If the government is not putting enough and they are leaving the foreign countries to come into the country and invest, whatever they make, they take it back. The only streaming platform we have in Nigeria is Iroko, and they are not as big as or generally accepted like the likes of Netflix and Amazon. So what is happening? What is happening is because the foreign countries are tapping into our resources and taking it back.
The high cost of production is forcing filmmakers to adjust their casts and other expenses in order to save costs. And that's closing the window to compete against big players like Hollywood and Bollywood. Being a big employer of labor in Nigeria, experts say this could be detrimental to the economy.
We can't compete with the global market because we don't have enough funding. I mean, Hollywood, the lowest budget Hollywood uses is about 100 million. But in Nigeria, you can make a movie for just 10 to 15 million. We are currently facing the challenges of budgeting, financing, marketing, distribution, quality. I mean, because of the decline in the revenue, people are no longer putting so much.
Sales of movie tickets declined to almost $850,000, which is 44% less than the previous figure. That's according to the Cinema Exhibitors Association of Nigeria. Industry players say grants from the public and private sectors could push up output and further give a boost to the entertainment sector.
And that report there is coming from the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Coming back home, the Gambia Red Cross Society over the weekend celebrated World First Aid Day under the theme Live Long First Aid at the Friendship Hotel in Bakau. Now, the world celebrates First Aid Day every 2nd of September of the year. Now, the day stresses the importance of training in first aid in saving lives. In the Gambia, the occasion brought together members of the Red Cross Society from all regions in the country to celebrate Humanitarian Day. President of the Gambia Red Cross Society, Mr. Jato Silla, solicited a thorough interest in first aid knowledge from the public and stride his institution intends to take.
Dissemination of first aid education and practice make communities more self-reliant, safe, and resilient, thereby reducing the impact of disasters, the number of deaths, and illnesses. Fellow volunteers, to all those here present, I challenge you all to learn first aid, regardless of your age. Everyone should have the knowledge on how to respond to accidents among the most vulnerable population through first aid training. We at the Gambia Red Cross, we will continue, one, to advocate for saving lives without discrimination, include people of all ages in first aid training, especially those who are left behind, increase first aid training in schools and workplaces, develop first aid training which is accessible and relevant for each target group.
The Secretary General of the Red Cross Society, Alassane Senghor, also gave a practical scenario of why first aid knowledge becomes handy.
When you train someone or you are trained in first aid, can be your own. Imagine you are in your own house or on the road and you are involved in an accident. You need professional help. And imagine if you do not have someone who is knowledgeable in terms of managing the crash to be able to give you the necessary first aid before you get access to professional medical assistance. And this is exactly what first aid is all about. So therefore, my point is first aid is not only about Red Cross. First aid is for everyone.
Alassane Senghor, Secretary General of the Gambia Red Cross Society, speaking there. And before him, you heard from the President, Mr. Jato Silla. Moving on elsewhere in the continent, second-hand materials trading is blooming in South Africa amid the high cost of living that remains a daunting challenge in the country. Amid the prevailing economic hardship in the Rainbow Nation, some citizens have turned to second-hand goods to make more living for their families. South Africa's economy is still reeling from the negative impacts of the COVID-19 global pandemic, in which an estimated 2 million jobs were lost, exacerbating the country's 35% unemployment rate. Here's more details of that in this report.
As a result of the high cost of living, some Johannesburg residents have elected to make extra bucks by buying and selling second-hand goods. Johan Max, a Johannesburg resident, and his family were, like many people, hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic.
So I was working for companies doing alarm systems, doing technical work, and we couldn't do any work, we couldn't do anything, and that's how I started making an income from that. We started a small biltong shop, selling biltong, but that was my main income. Buying and selling. So, and it helped us with a cash flow.
But that was not enough. Marx then started selling old goods from his household. He then joined a WhatsApp group that had been set up to buy and sell second-hand goods.
There's a lot of people on those groups. So a lot of people are struggling outside. They also doing buying and selling.
Melissa Oliver is one of those who started these WhatsApp groups.
So all that my group does is literally it creates a platform where people can advertise either a service that they give. So it would be home services like your nail technicians, hairdressers, gardening services, people that have odds and ends that they want to sell.
Oliver says as soon as she started this group, she realized that it's a necessary service to provide to her community. The group provides for people who need to make ends meet as the cost of living continues to rise.
So people would sell things on there, literally just maybe to put something on the table. So it would be items of clothing, TVs, small appliances, etc., that would be the increase at the end of the month. That is what I've noticed. So people would literally try and sell whatever they have to make ends meet.
Oliver says every day new people join in, also looking to make some extra money.
And from the reporter in South Africa now to the northern part of the continent, because in a bid to reduce health care costs and increase access to medicine, Tunisia has sought to encourage the production of generic drugs. Now, Tunisia is among several other countries on the African continent that can boast of having a well-structured pharmaceutical industry. The North African country's ambitious health program focuses on widening its healthcare production and accessibility to the African market. Here's more details of that in this report.
Tunisia's health minister says the North African state not only wants to avoid shortages of essential drugs by relying on local production, but it also plans to make more pharmaceutical products for export. The government is eyeing the large African market.
Tunisia's health strategy 2030 to 2050 is based on reaching self-sufficiency in medicines through the production of factories based here in the country. The next step is to boost exports to other African countries which do not have the capacity to produce the drugs they need.
In partnership with the Tunisian health authorities, French multinational pharmaceutical and healthcare company Sanofi aims to export drugs to 19 African countries.
This ambitious project is part of Sanof's strategic development. Our objective is to reach the African market through Tunisia by establishing factories here in North Africa, then exporting millions of medicine packets to sub-Saharan Africa.
The company's director of industrial operations added that Sanofi is investing $3.4 million to equip a new factory in Tunis. In addition, the annual investment for development and restructuring is estimated at $1.6 million until 2026.
We are constantly investing and modernizing our factory in Tunisia by equipping it with the latest technology and medicine-making machines. This gradual transformation will allow our Tunisian partners to provide the African market with high-quality drugs, which conform to international norms.
According to the Central Pharmacy of Tunisia, the country's laboratories cover 25% of the domestic market's drug needs. Tunisia aims to increase this rate to 50% in the next 8 years. The health department in Tunisia and French multinational pharmaceutical company Sanofi plan to produce and export 4 million medicine packets to sub-Saharan Africa next year. This quantity will increase to reach 36 million packets by 2026.
You are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Eyeafrica TV, and from the report there in Tunis, we now take a break and come back shortly. Stay with us, of course, stay with us. There's more coming ahead right after the break.
As part of government's commitment towards universal health coverage and also digitize the civil registration and vital statistics systems in the country, the Ministry of Health and partners will embark on a mass birth registration campaign and enrollment for the National Health Insurance Scheme effective August 1st, 2022. Every individual born in the Gambia or by Gambian parents and residents of the Gambia are eligible to register during this important national exercise by providing the following documents: birth certificate, national ID card or passport, driver's license, voter's card, residence permit, vet certificate of parent, infant welfare card, alcalo attestation. Rush now to register and encourage your family and friends to do so during this important campaign. For any information, call 1025. This campaign is supported by the government of the Gambia and partners.
Welcome back, and this is Eyeafrica TV, and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. And once again, many thanks for joining us. Let's now look at the rest of the stories. Now, the United Nations General Assembly has elected Casa Krosi as humanitarian diplomat as president of the 77 Assembly. The 193-member body picked the new leader after Abdullahi Sahid, president of the 76th session, finished his one-year term. Yahya Jammeh tells us more of that in this report.
Saba Korosi is now president of the United Nations 77th General Assembly with effect on Tuesday, September 13, 2022. Mr. Korosi will serve as president of the Assembly until September 2023. He served as Hungary's envoy to the United Nations from 2010 to 2014.
I, Csaba Kőrösi, solemnly declare that I shall truthfully perform my duties and exercise the functions entrusted to me as President of the General Assembly of the United Nations in all loyalty, discretion, and conscience.
The 76th session has now been closed and the 77th reopened, with President Saba Korosi taking his oath of allegiance to serve with dignity and orders. Speaking to journalists at the United Nations House, President Korosi presented a motto he called Solutions Through Solidarity, Sustainability and Conscience.
We must continue to reform and transform the United Nations, including the General Assembly, and strengthen our cooperation through trust. The motto of my presidency will be Solutions Through Solidarity, Sustainability and Science. This is why I've decided that the central theme of this general debate will be, quote, a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges, unquote.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres draws back on the challenges the world faced during the previous year.
Like the previous one, this session was marked by a series of deepening challenges. Rising prices, the erosion of purchasing power, growing food insecurity, and the gathering shadows of a global recession. A global pandemic that refused to be defeated, and the emergence of another health emergency in monkeypox, and deadly heat waves, storms, floods, and other natural disasters. I just came back from Pakistan. It's unimaginable to see a flooded area that is 3 times the size of my own country, Portugal, and the suffering of the people that is taking place.
Mr. Guterres also highlighted ferocious conflicts that are putting millions of lives in jeopardy, deepening poverty and inequality that continues to impede recovery and development, and a morally bankrupt global financial system that penalizes developing countries and blocks their path to sustainable recovery. On his last meeting as president of the 76th General Assembly, Abdullah Said said he had promised a presidency of hope built on 5 rays of hope.
Recovering from COVID-19, rebuilding sustainably, responding to the needs of the planet, respecting the rights of all, and revitalizing the United Nations. And every day for the past 365 days, my team and I worked to deliver on this vision. We convened 103 formal plenary meetings and adopted 307 resolutions and 140 decisions.
The United Nations General Assembly is the main policy-making organ of the organization. Comprising all member states, it provides a unique forum for multilateral discussion of the full spectrum of international issues covered by the Charter of the United Nations. The Assembly meets in different sessions from September to December each year, and thereafter as required. It discusses specific issues through dedicated agenda items or sub-items which lead to the adoption of resolutions. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
Back to matters in the African continent, because fuel prices have significantly dropped in Tanzania. According to the country's Energy and Water Utilities Regulatory Authority, Tanzanians have welcomed the news of the decline in fuel prices, which have gone down for the first time since the beginning of this year. Now, the price of oil in the world market for July 2022 decreased compared to prices a month before, and the government said it has been working on plans to reduce local pump prices. Here's more details of that in this report.
Fuel prices in Tanzania have dropped 13% from the previous year after a steady climb this year. A cooling of global prices and a local $27 million subsidy this month has contributed to the reduced prices.
The measures we took as a government was to seek out subsidies to reduce fuel prices. If we had allowed prices to be dictated solely by global prices, the commodity would not be affordable.
Many motorists in the country are relieved that fuel is now more affordable.
Fuel prices going down has really helped us in reducing the cost of living, especially for those who use vehicles all the time.
Budgets were not working. If you had set aside a certain amount for fuel, you'd had to increase it.
so life was really costly.
Last month, fuel prices in the country reached almost $1.5, the highest they've been in the last 9 years. High levies and charges locally, as well as supply disruptions due to the conflict in Ukraine, had this year contributed to the steady rise in fuel costs in the country.
In addition to introducing fuel subsidies, the government says in the last few months it's been working on reducing the cost of importing fuel. It says competitive bidding through the country's bulk procurement system has steadily brought fuel importation costs down by more than 30% since April this year.
While many in the country are happy about lower fuel prices, some business people are concerned about the nation's over-reliance on foreign fuel. They argue that it is causing inflationary pressures on the economy and keeping the cost of living high.
We should find a local solution that will help us reduce fuel prices so that commodity prices go down, instead of waiting for global fuel prices to come down so that local prices in turn come down.
Global fuel prices have now fallen to below $100 a barrel and are forecast by some analysts to remain so in the last quarter of 2022. The government says as long as that is the case, Tanzanians could continue to enjoy lower fuel prices.
Well, whilst fuel pump prices have significantly dropped in Tanzania here, in the Gambia, fuel prices still remains a concern, especially for the drivers. Now, onto our final story though, because Gambian rapper Killer Ace Tuesday donated 700 parcels of sugar, milk, tea bags, and 110 sanitary materials to the Mile 2 Central prisons to support inmates at the country's main infamous detention center. The rapper also promised to continue his support towards the rehabilitation of the country's central prisons, community libraries, and a mentorship for prisoners. Mavuji Sese has the details in this report.
It is a common belief that prisons support the upholding of the rule of law, justice and good governance, without which there will only be jungle justice. However, most prisons in Africa, including the Gambia, are usually used as punishment centers instead of rehabilitation. Superintendent Yahya Jammeh of the Female Wing Department of the Mile 2 Central Prison said this central prison cannot do it alone, saying Killer Ace's gesture was a good one, appealing to other artists to emulate him. Commissioner of Operations Lamin Sow said there are 3 reasons that usually lead to people in prison. He said some go to prison because they cannot defend themselves, while some offend the law, and for others is destiny. Killer Ace himself said he decided to direct his support to the prison because he was one time remanded there himself and has experienced the difficulty inmates are facing there.
It was inspired when I was here in remand in 2019. And during my time there, I was privileged to engage with a lot of young people. I was privileged to understand the situation and the circumstances and the plight of many of the prisoners, including the prison guards themselves, as I see the hard work that they do tirelessly inside of the prison. And that inspired me for when I come out, I must try to find a solution using what I do most, my music and my influence, to try to at least help a little bit or bring change. And still today, I still remember some of the people that were there that were saying, Ace, please don't forget us. Please don't forget us. So even sometimes at night, I remember those calls from the prisoners there. Initially, it started after one of my events. Every time I have an event, I take a commission of that profit and I allocate it for donation to the prison. That was for 1 year, 2 year, and luckily this year, thanks to some great people, it's not a single-handed effort, even though I am the man behind it, but you have a lot of good people behind me who hear about the cause and want to support one way or another. Maybe not many, but I must also tell them thank you. And that inspired me to think about this project.
Deputy Director General of Prison, Keta Sedi, urged people to emulate Killer Ace in supporting the prison service. He called on Killer Ace to let the community know that the prison is now a rehabilitation center and advocate for communities to accept people who are freed from prison and help to reintegrate them in the society. He also stressed that there are residents who had once passed through prison, but that does not make them to lose hope.
We
remember that we always look at the back, because it's not always good to look at the forward. Look at the back, people behind you. If everybody follow your footsteps, you've been here before. You out there, but you still don't forget people behind you. And I think all of us should learn out of this. I mean, life, you should always look at the back, not always in front. And the donation that you have contributed is a lot, because it is from your bottom of your heart. Again, on behalf of my Director General and the staff that are senior officers that are here with us, we welcome, we thank you very much. This would help a lot. I mean, the prison these days and 2 years ago is a total different one. And through your music, I want you also to help us by trying to reach out to young ones and even to society, letting them know that most of our prisoners now are rehabilitated. Letting them know that, let them give second chance to prisoners coming from Mile 2.
Mafuji Sise, Eyeafrica News.
Well, as the saying goes, who feels it knows it. Well done to Kiloes for providing food and sanitary materials to inmates at the Mile 2 Central Prisons. And with that report there by Mafuji Sise, we eventually bring this news edition to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website on Eyeafrica.tv. But for now, many thanks for the privilege of your company. Thanks for watching, and do have a pleasant evening. Bye for now.